Welcome, sleepy soul. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to help you drift into deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I'd just turned 31 when I finally closed on my first house. Not a big one, just a small one-story place in a quiet part of Maple Ridge, a small town about 40 minutes outside of St. Louis. I'd been renting apartments since college, and honestly, I was sick of paper-thin walls, upstairs neighbors who stomped like elephants, and landlords who'd take weeks to fix a leaking faucet. Buying this place felt like finally planting my feet somewhere solid. The first week I was on a high. I mowed my own lawn, replaced my mailbox, painted the front door navy blue, little things that made it feel like mine. I even met a few of the neighbors. There was Mrs. Daly, a sweet older woman who lived right next door and baked the kind of cookies you'd only see in magazines. She was the first to welcome me with a plate of chocolate chip and "You just let me know if you need anything, honey." Then there was Rick and Tanya, a young couple across the street who invited me over for burgers the second weekend I moved in. They seemed normal enough, loud but kind-hearted. But 2 houses down, in a faded white house with boarded-up windows on one side and a front yard that hadn't seen a mower in years, lived Leonard. That's what I heard his name was. Lenny, to a few of the neighbors. He was maybe 55, always in a flannel shirt no matter the weather, with sunken eyes and a cigarette that seemed permanently glued to his lips. The first time I saw him, he was just standing by his mailbox, staring at me while I unloaded boxes from my car. Didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. I told myself not to make assumptions. Maybe he was just one of those quiet types. But then, a few nights later, around 11:30, I got my first knock. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't light or polite. It was heavy, impatient. I froze halfway through, brushing my teeth. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the kind of people who knock that late usually aren't bringing good news. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Leonard. He was wearing the same flannel, same cigarette hanging from his lip, though it wasn't lit. His eyes darted around, nervous. "Hey man," he said when I cracked the door open. "You got any extra bread?" "Ran out and can't get to the store till morning." I hesitated, but fine. I grabbed a loaf from the counter and handed it over. He nodded, didn't thank me, and just walked off without another word. Weird, sure, but harmless. Or so I thought. The next time, it was 1 a.m. Same pounding on the door, same man. "Hey, he muttered, scratching at his neck. "You got a bucket or something? My water's off again. Need to fill it up." I gave him one. He smiled this strange, crooked smile, too wide, too long, and said, "You're a good guy, you know that?" That time I didn't sleep much. It became a pattern. Every other night or so, he'd knock. Always asking for something different. Sugar, lighter fluid, batteries, even once a flashlight. At first I answered out of courtesy, but the more he came, the more I started ignoring it. Until one night, about 3 weeks in, I heard him again. But this time the knock didn't stop. It went on for almost a full minute. Thud, 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 thud. I was about to yell through the door when I peeked through the peephole and saw something different. He looked panicked, like genuinely terrified. His hands were shaking. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway and his eyes were wide and unfocused. "Help me, please," he said when he noticed me. "Can you come over?" "My grill. I can't get it to work." I frowned. "Your grill?" "It's midnight, Leonard. Please, I can't figure it out," he said quickly. "I just bought it. Please." Part of me wanted to slam the door shut, but something about how frantic he looked. I don't know. Maybe it was guilt or curiosity, but I said, "All right, give me a minute." He nodded and hurried off down the sidewalk. I slipped on my sneakers, grabbed my phone, and headed over. Leonard's house looked even creepier up close. Half the porch light was hanging off the wall, wires exposed. The windows were covered in grime and the paint peeled in long strips down the siding. His gate creaked when I pushed it open, and the backyard was pitch dark except for the faint glow from a single bulb over the back door. There was no grill. Just dirt, some broken patio chairs, and a few trash bags piled near the fence. "Leonard?" I called out. From somewhere inside came a muffled voice. Yeah, I'm down here. Basement. Just help me grab some meat from the freezer." I froze. The back door was wide open, and just beyond it, I could see the top of a narrow staircase leading down into total darkness. You got a light down there?" I called. No answer at first. Then faintly, "They're broke. Come down anyway." Something about the way he said that. It didn't sound right, like his voice was off, strained, or deeper. "I'll wait till morning," I said firmly. "Just call me when you get the lights fixed." And right after I said that, footsteps, fast, running, up those stairs, heavy and quick. I bolted. I didn't even look back. I jumped off his porch, ran through his yard, tore through my gate, and slammed my door shut behind me. Heart pounding, I locked everything. Deadbolt, latch, even shoved a chair under the handle. I peeked through the blinds, but there was nothing. No one. Just the quiet hum of the streetlight. I barely slept that night. For the next few days, I didn't see Leonard. No knocks, no movement, nothing. I started to convince myself maybe he left town or got arrested or something. Then, a week later, I was out mowing my lawn when my neighbor across the street, Rick, waved me over. "You been doing okay, man?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Haven't seen you much." I told him about what happened, about Leonard and the grill, the basement, everything. Rick's expression changed immediately. "What house did you say that was again?" "The one 2 doors down," I said. "White one, busted fence." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Dude, nobody lives there." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, lowering his voice, "that place has been empty since the old man died. Water's off, power's off. Hell, the floor's probably rotten by now." I just stared at him. I saw him. I talked to him. Multiple times Rick shook his head. "Ain't possible. That place has been abandoned for years. You can check the records if you want." He must have seen how shaken I looked because he offered to call the cops. They showed up within 15 minutes. 2 officers who clearly weren't expecting much. They went in through the same back door I had. About 20 minutes later, one of them came out looking pale. When I asked what they found, he said, "Not much. Old furniture, cobwebs, and a freezer in the basement that's, well, empty now." "Empty now?" I repeated. He just looked at me for a moment before saying, "If I were you, I'd stay away from that property." I moved out 2 weeks later. Some nights when I can't sleep, I still think about the way those footsteps sounded. Fast, desperate, like whoever that was couldn't wait to reach me. And sometimes, in that brief half-second before I drift off, I swear I can still hear that knock. Knock, knock, knock. I was 20 years old the summer before my sophomore year of college, and all I wanted was a decent place to live near campus. My name's Ryan Keller, and at that point in my life, I thought I had everything figured out. I just landed a part-time job at a hardware store, had a solid group of friends, and was ready for what I thought would be an easy, laid-back year. Finding a place to live, though, that was another story. The apartments near Hollow Creek University were either ridiculously expensive or looked like they'd been condemned sometime back in the 90s. After 2 weeks of searching, I finally realized that unless I wanted to live 40 minutes away and commute every day, I needed a roommate. I put up a post on Craigslist one night sitting at the edge of my bed typing out, "Male student, looking for a roommate to share a 2-bedroom apartment near campus. Must be responsible and able to pay half of rent. No pets, no drama." I hit post and closed my laptop, expecting maybe a few replies over the next few days. But barely an hour later, I got one. The name was Marjorie D., and her message said, "Hello, Ryan. I saw your listing and I'd be very interested. I'm a quiet, tidy woman and I can pay on time every month. I don't mind living with a student if that's okay with you. I assumed it was another student at first, but when I scrolled to the bottom of the message and saw her profile photo, my eyebrows lifted. She was much older than I expected. Gray hair, maybe 70, wearing a pink cardigan and thick glasses. I hesitated. I wasn't exactly thrilled about living with someone's grandma, but she offered to pay her half of the deposit right away, and no one else had replied. So I thought, what's the worst that could happen? When the semester started, I moved into the small 2-bedroom apartment at the Willow Heights complex. It was an older building, creaky floors, yellowed walls, but it was walking distance from campus, which was all I cared about. Marjorie arrived the same day I did. She drove up in a beige Ford Taurus, trunk packed with floral suitcases and a box labeled linens. "Ryan, dear." "You must be Ryan," she said with a smile that was polite but didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's me," I said, forcing a grin. "You're Marjorie?" "Yes, dear." "Please call me Marge." She spoke softly, but there was something slightly off about the way she smiled. Too long, too deliberate. Still, I helped her bring her things inside, and for the first couple of weeks she seemed fine. She kept to herself mostly. Her door was always closed and I rarely heard her move around. Occasionally I'd bump into her in the kitchen and we'd have small talk about the weather or the noisy college kids outside. But after the third week, little things started to feel strange. One night, I was sitting on the couch watching a late game when I heard something, high-pitched giggling from her room. It was faint but constant, like someone trying to stifle laughter under their breath. At first I thought she was on the phone, but the more I listened, the weirder it felt. There weren't any words, just giggles, soft, childlike ones that didn't match her voice at all. The next morning I saw her in the kitchen pouring tea. "Hey Marge," I said casually. You, have company last night?" She didn't even look up. "Company? No, dear." "Why?" "I just thought I heard someone laughing." "Around midnight?" She paused, spoon midair. Then she smiled in this slow, almost mechanical way. "Oh, you must have dreamed it, sweetheart." That word, sweetheart, made my stomach twist. I didn't say anything else. As the weeks went by, things escalated. I'd catch her watching me from the hallway. Not staring directly, she'd stand there quietly, hands folded, eyes fixed on whatever I was doing. Once, I turned around from the fridge and she was just there, standing behind the counter, completely still. "Everything okay, Marge?" I asked. She blinked slowly. "Just making sure you're keeping tidy." Then she turned and shuffled back to her room. After that, I started locking my bedroom door at night, but the old lock barely worked. It was one of those turnstile knobs you could open with a butter knife. A few nights later, I woke up to a faint tap. Tap. Tap on my door. I rolled over, checked my phone, 3:14 a.m. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but then it came again. Soft, slow. "Marge?" I called, half asleep. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then came that same giggling, quiet, high-pitched, muffled, right outside my door. I froze, staring at the dark gap under the door, where I could see faint shadows shifting. My heart was pounding now. "Marge, are you okay?" No answer. Just the sound of her shuffling away, her slippers whispering against the carpet. That was it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I decided I'd confront her, but her door stayed closed all day. 2 nights later, it got worse. I'd moved my desk in front of my bedroom door just in case. I felt ridiculous, but it gave me some peace of mind. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke to the sound of my doorknob turning. Click, click, click. Then came the push. My desk scraped against the floor, the door pressing into it from the other side. "Marge," I whispered. A low, croaky voice answered, almost singing. "Ryan, you shouldn't lock your door, sweetheart." My whole body went cold. "Go back to your room," I said, trying to sound calm. But instead of leaving, she started laughing, that same giggle, louder this time, and slammed her weight into the door. The desk rattled, books fell, and I shoved my shoulder against it, heart hammering. "Stop it!" I yelled. Then she screamed. It was sharp, guttural, and went on for what felt like forever before it suddenly stopped. I stayed there, holding the door shut until sunrise. When I finally worked up the nerve to open it, my hands were shaking. The front door to the apartment was wide open, letting in the morning air. And when I looked at my bedroom door from the outside, there were knives sticking out of it. Every single kitchen knife we owned had been stabbed through the wood, some buried so deep I could barely see the handles. My stomach dropped. I called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived within minutes, asking calm, routine questions while I tried to explain what happened. They eventually knocked on Marjorie's door. No response. They opened it slowly, and I'll never forget what I saw. The walls were covered with old photos, dozens of them, taped up in uneven rows. Each one was of me. Some were from inside the apartment, some outside. Me walking to my car, sitting on the couch, even sleeping in my room. There was also a box on her bed filled with my mail, things I hadn't even realized were missing. When they found her, she was crouched in the corner, humming softly and rocking back and forth. Her fingernails were caked with something dark. The officers took her out in handcuffs while she whispered something I'll never forget. "You shouldn't have locked me out, sweetheart. You were supposed to stay with me." I moved out the next day. I've never used Craigslist again. Never shared an apartment with anyone I didn't personally know. Every once in a while, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still think I hear that faint, high-pitched giggle somewhere in my apartment. And every time, I check to make sure my door's locked and that the knives are still in the kitchen. I was 10 years old the summer everything changed. That was the year my family moved into a small 2-story house on the edge of a quiet rural town in northern Kentucky. It wasn't much, just a weathered white farmhouse with a wraparound porch and a creaky old windmill out front. But to my parents, it was a dream come true. For me, though, it was isolation. There were no nearby kids, no corner stores, and no sidewalks. Just endless fields, an old gravel road, and silence thick enough to feel in your chest. The nearest house stood about half a mile away, hidden behind a row of tall pine trees and a sagging wire fence. The man who lived there was strange. Even back then, before I understood what strange really meant, I knew something about him wasn't right. His name was Mr. Langley. That's all my mom ever called him. I first met him the week we moved in. My dad and I were unloading boxes from the back of his old Ford pickup when I saw him standing at the edge of our property line, his silhouette framed by the sinking orange sun. He was tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed almost translucent in the fading light. He wore a tattered brown coat despite the summer heat, and his eyes, sunken and gray, didn't blink much. He raised a hand in greeting but didn't say a word. "Don't stare, kiddo," my dad muttered, setting a heavy box on the porch. "That's just our neighbor. Be polite, but keep your distance, yeah?" "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because some people just like to be left alone." That night, while my parents were busy unpacking, I looked out my bedroom window and saw him again, standing in his own yard, motionless like he'd been watching the house the whole time. His yard was overgrown, the grass high enough to swallow his ankles. Every window on his house had been painted over in dull gray. Not a single light shone inside. Even from that distance, I felt him looking straight at me. That became routine. Every weekday afternoon, I'd walk home from school down the long gravel road that curved past his property. Sometimes I'd see him sitting on his porch swing, rocking ever so slightly, the sound of the rusty chain squeaking in the wind. Other times he'd stand near the fence, pretending to rake leaves that weren't there. He always called out to me, "Hey there, kid," he'd say in that hoarse, dry voice of his. "Long walk from school, huh?" I'd nod or mumble something quick and keep walking, pretending not to notice how his eyes followed me all the way down the road. One day he called out, "You like candy?" I froze. He smiled, revealing a set of yellowed teeth. "Got some peppermints inside. You can come on up if you want." I shook my head and picked up my pace. He chuckled. "Suit yourself." That night I told my mom about it. "Mr. Langley's just being friendly," she said absent-mindedly while stirring pasta sauce. "He's old and probably lonely. Don't be rude." Honey Dad didn't say much, but I noticed the way his jaw tightened. "Just keep walking straight home," he finally said. After that, I tried my best to ignore Mr. Langley, but he made it impossible. Sometimes I'd find small objects left at the edge of our driveway, an old coin, a broken toy car, a single marble. Once there was a folded piece of paper that said, "You should smile more." I stopped walking that way for a few days, but there was no avoiding it forever. My school bus only went down one road. Then came the nights. The first time it happened, I thought I was dreaming. I woke up to a faint, flickering light moving across my ceiling. When I sat up, I realized it was coming from outside. Someone was shining a flashlight into my second-story window. I froze. My bed faced the window, and even though I wanted to look, my body refused to move. After maybe a minute, the light went out. I lay awake until sunrise, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I finally told my parents, they brushed it off. "Probably just a car on the road," Dad said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "There's no road on that side of the house," I whispered. "Then maybe it was lightning," Mom added. "Don't scare yourself, sweetheart." But I knew better. It happened again a week later, then again the next. Each time, the light lingered a little longer. One night in July, I woke up to not just the light, but a sound, a dull thud, then another. It took me a second to recognize it, the sound of a ladder being propped against the house. I sat up, trembling, and turned my head toward the window. A faint beam of light wavered against the glass, followed by the slow creak of metal steps. Then, a face appeared. It was Mr. Langley. He smiled wide, his eyes hollow and glistening in the light. He tapped a single finger against the glass, mouthing something I couldn't hear. When I hesitated, he gestured for me to open the window. My throat went dry. I couldn't breathe. Then he spoke, muffled through the glass. "Don't be scared, kid. Just want to talk." That was enough. I screamed, so loud my voice cracked, and bolted out of my room, down the hall, into my parents' bedroom. "Mom! Dad! He's outside my window!" They shot up instantly, half asleep and confused. My dad grabbed a flashlight, muttering curses as he stormed toward my room. By the time we got there, the ladder was gone. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, showing nothing but the old oak tree outside swaying in the wind. Dad searched around the yard but came back shaking his head. "There's nobody out there." "I saw him. He was right there," I cried. Mom pulled me close, sighing. "Honey, you're dreaming again. It's probably just shadows. You need to stop watching those scary shows before bed," I wanted to yell, to make them believe me. But I just stood there shaking, staring out the window into the empty night. The next morning, there were 2 fresh boot prints in the dirt below my window. My dad said they were his from the night before, but I'd seen his shoes. They didn't match. A few days later, when we drove past Mr. Langley's house on the way to town, there was a bright red "For Sale" sign staked in the front yard. The windows were still painted gray. The porch swing creaked softly in the wind, but the house looked dead. He was gone. No one ever saw him again. Not me, not my parents, not anyone in town. Years later, after I'd grown up and moved away, I stopped by that old neighborhood out of pure curiosity. The Langley property was abandoned. The roof had caved in, vines crawling up the walls. I peeked through one of the shattered windows. Inside, the floors were littered with debris, and in the corner of the living room, I found something half buried in dust. a small stack of Polaroid photos. Most were faded, but a few were still clear enough to make out. They were pictures of kids, walking down the same gravel road. One of them was me. The handwriting on the back read, "Smiles better when he's alone." I dropped the photos and ran out of that house without looking back. Even now, whenever I hear the creak of a porch swing or the faint rattle of metal on glass, something deep inside me freezes. Because no matter where I go, I still see that gray, smiling face behind the window. I never thought I'd end up living in a place like that. Not after everything my family had worked for. When the lockdown hit our city in 2020, we lost everything. Our jobs, our apartment, our sense of stability. Within a few months, my mom, dad, younger brother, and I found ourselves checking into the Silver Pines shelter, which used to be an old roadside motel just outside of Fresno. The place had been converted into a homeless complex, but you could still tell what it really was. A rundown 2-story motel with flickering lights, doors that didn't close right, and thin walls that carried every cough, argument, and cry from the rooms beside you. The shelter staff tried to make it feel livable. Every morning they'd knock for temperature checks, pass out boxed meals for breakfast and dinner, and make their rounds to make sure nobody was fighting or sneaking in alcohol. It was rough, but I kept reminding myself, it was temporary. My name's Lila, and back then I had just turned 18. That place taught me a lot about people, how fragile, strange, and unpredictable they could be. Some of the residents were nice, families like ours who'd just fallen on hard times. But others, you learned fast to keep your distance. There were the ones who'd scream at night, the ones who talked to themselves, the ones who stole from other rooms. And then there was him. His name was Rick. Our neighbor in room 12B, the one directly to the left of ours. He was in his early 30s, maybe 31 or 32, bald head with a patchy reddish beard, always wearing this old brown hoodie and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked normal enough, and honestly at first he was the only one who did. My mom met him first. She's one of those people who could start a conversation in an elevator. I remember her coming back one afternoon with this grin saying, "You gotta meet our neighbor, Lila." He's actually normal for once. I didn't think much of it then. But I'd see Rick outside sometimes, sitting on the curb by the smoking area with his coffee, chatting with my parents. My dad, who's usually quiet and cautious about everyone, even started joining them. That should have been my first red flag. Dad never trusted anyone that fast. One night, Mom insisted I come out and talk with them. "He's funny," she said. "You'll like him." So I did. Rick turned out to be easy to talk to. He had this sarcastic sense of humor, always cracking dark jokes about life in the shelter. He'd ask questions about what I wanted to do when things got better, tell stories about his crazy ex-wife, and talk about how he used to work in construction before the pandemic wiped out everything. He was rough around the edges, but compared to the people screaming in the parking lot at night, he seemed almost normal. And that's exactly what made it dangerous. Weeks passed. We'd hang out sometimes when my parents were outside just talking. He'd smoke, I'd drink a soda and vent about being stuck there. He made me laugh. Then slowly, things started to change. It began with little things, compliments that lingered too long, jokes that didn't feel like jokes. 18, huh? He'd say one night, smirking. "You're barely legal. Bet the world feels different now, huh?" I'd just roll my eyes and laugh awkwardly. "You sound like my creepy uncle," I'd say, trying to brush it off. He'd grin. "Yeah, but I bet your uncle doesn't listen like I do." It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to make things weird. In a place like that, everyone clung to any sense of normalcy, even if it was fake. So I kept the peace. Then one afternoon, my mom brought up something strange. "Rick said the guard's been creeping around the back windows at night," she told me while folding laundry. "Says he's been peeking in bathrooms to catch people smoking." I frowned. "Who told him that?" "He said he saw it." That didn't sit right with me. The security guards were strict, sure, but they were always stationed near the front office. I'd never once seen them behind the rooms. Still, my parents believed it. They were already fed up with the shelter's rules. But that night, I heard something that changed everything. It was close to midnight. The air was heavy and still, the kind that made even the crickets sound distant. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard it. Crunch. Footsteps outside the window. The window was half open. It was too hot to close completely. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth, and listened. Another crunch. Closer this time. Then, right as I leaned forward, I saw it. A pale face, white as chalk, pressed against the screen for half a second before jerking away. I screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over the trash bin. My dad came rushing in. What happened? There, someone was outside, I shouted, pointing at the window. He bolted outside immediately, Mom right behind him. They came back less than a minute later. No one was there. The dirt under the window was scuffed, though, like someone had been standing there. What the hell, Dad muttered. You sure you saw someone? Yes, his face. He was watching me. They didn't doubt me, but when they went to the front to tell security, they found out something strange. The only guard on duty that night was stationed at the gate, a black guy named Curtis, and he hadn't moved from his post in hours. Whoever was outside my window wasn't him. The next morning, my parents went around asking other residents if they'd seen or heard anything. No one had. Not even a whisper about the peeping guard rumor. It felt like the story had come out of nowhere, straight from Rick's mouth. That's when things started to click in my head. The rumor, the window, his sudden friendliness, and the way he'd started looking at me. I told my mom I didn't want to talk to him anymore. She agreed. She said she was getting bad vibes too. But avoiding him wasn't easy. The rooms were just a few feet apart, and the walkway outside was narrow. He'd knock sometimes, pretending to ask for a lighter or to borrow detergent. When we didn't answer, he'd just stand there for a while. We could hear his footsteps pacing. One night I heard my dad whispering angrily through the wall. "Don't ever talk to my daughter again, you hear me?" There was silence. Then a slow laugh. "Relax, man. It's just conversation." The next day, Rick was moved 2 rooms down, apparently at my dad's request. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. A few nights later, I woke up to a tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window again. My stomach turned cold. I pulled my blanket around me and sat frozen. Then a whisper, soft, almost playful. "Lila, you awake?" It was him. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room. My dad stormed outside, but by the time he got there, the walkway was empty. The staff checked his room that morning. He wasn't there. His things were gone too. They figured he'd left during the night. Sometimes residents just vanished. But about a week later, maintenance found something in one of the unused storage rooms near the back of the complex. An old mattress, a half-empty water bottle, cigarette butts, and a small hole carved into the drywall facing our bathroom window. I can't even describe how sick that made me feel, knowing that for days, maybe weeks, he'd been watching us. The staff tried to play it down, said it looked old, probably from before Rick, but we knew better. We moved out 2 months later once the city started easing restrictions and my dad got work again. Even now, in a normal apartment with locked doors and solid walls, I still close the bathroom window every night. I still catch myself glancing toward it before I shower, because sometimes late at night I swear I still hear that tap, 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 like he never left. I never really thought much about neighbors before last year. I used to think they were just background people, the ones you wave to out of politeness when you check your mail or drag the trash bins to the curb. You don't expect them to matter much. You definitely don't expect them to ruin your sense of safety. When I first moved into the Mapleview apartments, I was just trying to keep my life together. It wasn't much, a rundown complex tucked behind an old grocery store on the edge of town, but rent was cheap and they didn't ask too many questions. It was 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic mess. My mom and I had just lost our house after my stepdad got laid off. We'd been bouncing between relatives and motels until we landed here, in what used to be a budget inn converted into temporary family housing. That's what the sign said. Really, it was just a homeless shelter that looked like a motel with broken ice machines and cigarette burns on the doors. Still, we had our own room, 2 twin beds, a flickering TV, and a bathroom that smelled faintly of bleach and mold. Compared to sleeping in a car, it was heaven. The first few weeks were quiet enough. People kept to themselves mostly. You had your usual mix, a few families down on their luck, a handful of older guys who'd clearly been living rough for years, and a couple of women with kids trying to make things work. I didn't really talk to anyone. I was 15 then, awkward, anxious, the kind of kid who preferred staying inside with headphones rather than making eye contact with strangers. Then there was Darren. He moved into the room 2 doors down from us sometime in early May. I remember because he showed up in the middle of the night, loud, stumbling, carrying 3 garbage bags full of clothes. The front desk lady was already yelling at him to keep it down. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with greasy blonde hair and a face that looked like it hadn't smiled in years. He had that hollow, tired look people get when they've been living hard for too long. For the first week or so, I barely noticed him. He mostly stayed inside. But then little things started happening. It started when I took our dog, Pepper, out for her evening walk. She was this tiny brown mutt with more attitude than size, and I always walked her right after dinner. I was looping around the parking lot when I noticed Darren standing by his door, just watching. He wasn't smoking or talking, just standing there, eyes fixed on me. At first I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe he just zoned out. But then it kept happening. Every time I walked Pepper, he was there. Sometimes he'd whistle. Sometimes he'd call out something like, "Cute dog you got there." Or worse, "You're out late again, huh? Not scared someone might grab you?" The way he said it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a promise. I tried to avoid him after that. Started walking Pepper earlier. Stopped going to the vending machines at night. Stopped even stepping outside if I heard his voice. But he noticed that too. He started shouting across the courtyard whenever he saw me. "Hey, why you hiding, huh?" Ain't neighborly to ignore people. Every word felt like a hand reaching for me. Mom didn't notice much. She was working double shifts cleaning offices and came home exhausted every night. The last thing I wanted was to give her another worry. We were barely holding on to that room. If she complained about someone, the management might have kicked us out just to avoid the hassle. So I stayed quiet, but it got worse. I started noticing shadows outside our curtains at night. Just faint outlines, but unmistakably someone standing there. Our room was ground level, facing the parking lot. The first time, I thought maybe it was another resident out for a smoke. But then, one night, when everyone else was asleep, I peeked through the curtain just a little. It was him, Darren. He was standing there motionless, with his face pressed against the window screen, just breathing. His eyes didn't look shocked or ashamed. They looked satisfied. I backed away slowly, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I just turned off the lamp and lay in bed pretending to be asleep until the sun came up. After that, I kept the curtain shut at all times. Even during the day, I didn't feel safe. Then, about 2 weeks later, he scared me worse than I thought possible. It was a Saturday morning. Mom had left early for work, and I was in the bathroom getting ready. I'd just gotten out of the shower, towel wrapped around me, brushing my teeth and dancing to some music playing off my old Bluetooth speaker. For a few blissful minutes, I forgot about him. Then I realized something. I'd left the bathroom window open to let the steam out. The sink was directly across from it. Anyone standing outside could see me clear as day. My stomach dropped. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window, and there he was, Darren. Standing outside, face pressed to the mesh screen, eyes wide and unblinking. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. Toothbrush still in my mouth, music still playing, I just froze. Then, when he realized I'd seen him, he didn't flinch or run. He smiled. This slow, disgusting grin like he was proud of himself. I backed up until I hit the wall, then grabbed my phone. But before I could even decide what to do, I heard the crunch of footsteps fading away. I never saw him again after that. Management said he moved out, but no one saw him pack or leave. I wish that was the end of it. By late 2019, life had started to settle. We'd scraped enough money together to rent a small duplex on the south end of town. I was starting high school, and for once I felt like things might finally calm down. But safety, I've learned, is a fragile illusion. It happened on a cold November day. School was fine, better than usual actually. I even laughed a little in class, which was rare for me. But on the bus ride home, that familiar feeling crept in. The sense that something bad was waiting for me. I got off at my stop and started walking down my street. It was quiet, just a few houses scattered along a curved road that looped like a horseshoe. Most of the residents were older folks who rarely came outside. Halfway home, I saw a guy come out from one of the houses. He looked about 17. Tall, broad shoulders, clean cut. Maybe a senior from another school. At first glance, he seemed harmless. He gave a friendly wave. "Hey," he said, smiling. I nodded back. I didn't want to be rude. He walked down his driveway toward me. "You new around here?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice light. "Just moved a few months ago." He grinned. "Cool. I'm Travis. You?" "Kayla." "You go to Southview High?" "Yeah." "Nice," he said, walking closer. "You seem chill." "Not many people around here are." His tone was easygoing, but something about his eyes unsettled me. Like the smile didn't quite reach them. I tried to take a step back casually, but then he reached out and touched the small of my back. It was a light touch, but it froze me solid. "Hey, what are you doing?" I stammered. He didn't answer. He just kept walking forward, gently pushing me up the driveway toward his house. I tried to pull away, but his arm suddenly tightened around my waist. "Let me go." "Relax," he whispered. "Just want to talk." When I screamed, his hand clamped over my mouth. The pressure was strong enough to hurt. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard it felt like my chest would break. I thought I was going to die. Right there, in broad daylight, on a quiet street. But then, instinct kicked in. I bit his hand as hard as I could. He howled in pain and jerked back. I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted down the street, tears blurring my eyes, fumbling with my keys at the door. When I finally managed to unlock it and slam it shut, I turned just in time to see him running after me. Silent, furious, his face twisted with rage. I locked every bolt, ran to my room, and sat shaking on the floor. Mom came home an hour later. When I told her what happened, she frowned but didn't believe me. Said maybe I misread the situation. Said boys can be stupid sometimes. That night I cried quietly so she wouldn't hear. Months went by. I didn't see him again, not until quarantine started. It was early evening. I'd finally gathered the courage to go for a walk again. The air was cool and the streets were empty. Just me and the sound of my sneakers on the pavement. But halfway up the hill, I felt it. That same crawling sensation on the back of my neck. Someone was watching me. I turned around and froze. It was him. Travis. He had a big dog this time, a dark shepherd-looking thing. His hair was longer, his expression colder. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey," he said softly. "Remember me?" I couldn't answer. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You know, it was really rude, the way you ran off last time." My throat went dry. He leaned closer until his lips were near my ear. "I'm gonna make sure you don't run this time." I felt his hand grip my waist again, harder this time. I tried to pull away, but he yanked me toward him. My shirt tore. I screamed. But just then, headlights washed over us. A car was turning onto the street. He let go instantly. By the time the car slowed, he was gone, vanished into the yards. The driver rolled down the window. It was my neighbor's son, Ryan. "Hey, you okay?" I broke down right there in the road. He drove me home while I tried to explain between sobs. Mom still didn't believe me, said I was overreacting, that maybe it was just some prank. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. That same night, I saw a shadow move past my window. I've been keeping a knife beside my bed ever since. Sometimes when I take Pepper out late, I swear I can hear a faint whistle. That same slow, taunting tune Darren used to make. I don't know if he ever really left. I don't know if Travis was connected somehow. All I know is that both of them had the same look in their eyes, that smug, knowing stare that told me they enjoyed being seen. The world feels smaller now. Every window looks like a set of eyes, and every shadow feels like it's just waiting for me to look back. I was 12 the summer everything changed. We had just moved into a small town in northern Wisconsin called Red Oak Hills, a place that looked straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting. There was one gas station, a single diner that doubled as the town's gossip hub, and a population that hadn't crossed 700 since the 82nds. People waved when you drove by, left pies on porches, and kids still rode their bikes until the streetlights came on. Back then, I thought I'd stepped into some peaceful, picture-perfect world. I couldn't have been more wrong. My mom, Lydia, had finally saved enough after her divorce to get us out of the apartment complex in Milwaukee and into our own small house, nothing fancy, a 2-bedroom, a white clapboard home with green shutters and a squeaky screen door. It sat across the street from a tall, unkempt house with peeling paint and overgrown shrubs that nearly swallowed the front porch. That was where Mr. Riley lived. Everyone called him Tom, but nobody seemed to like saying his name. It always came with a certain pause, like they were swallowing something bitter. When we first moved in, he came over that same evening. Mom and I were unpacking boxes when the doorbell rang. He stood there holding a small brown box with a crooked smile. "Welcome to Red Oak Hills," he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, like someone who'd smoked too much for too long. "Thought I'd drop by with a little something." Mom smiled politely. "Oh, that's very kind of you." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he interrupted, his eyes flicking toward me for a second too long before he looked back at Mom. "It's homemade fudge. My kids used to love it." That caught my attention. "You have kids?" I asked. He nodded, though the movement seemed slow and reluctant. "Had. They're grown now. Don't come around much." Mom thanked him again and closed the door. As she turned away, she muttered, "He gives me the creeps." I didn't think much of it at the time. Adults always thought other adults were weird for reasons kids couldn't see. But the way his eyes lingered on me stuck with me for days. By the second week, I'd made a few friends. Jamie from the corner house was my age and had an old PlayStation 2 hooked up in his garage where we'd play Twisted Metal or Madden after school. "Don't go near Riley's place," he warned one day while we were shooting hoops in his driveway. "Why not?" He shrugged, dribbling. "He's weird, man. My dad says he's always out back burning stuff. Sometimes he's digging holes at night, like 2 a.m. or something." I laughed. "Maybe he's just burying his bad cooking." Jamie didn't laugh. "My older brother says he had a wife once. She just disappeared. Cops came but didn't find anything." That night, when I looked across the street, I saw the faint orange glow of a fire in his backyard and the shadow of Mr. Riley moving slowly back and forth. I told myself Jamie was just trying to scare me. A few days later, I was walking home from the park when I saw Riley standing by his mailbox, fiddling with something inside. "Hey there," he said as I passed. "You're Lydia's kid, right?" "Yeah," I said cautiously. He smiled too wide, like it hurt his face to do it. "You remind me of my daughter when she was your age. Same kind of hair." Thanks," I muttered. "You like wrestling?" he asked suddenly. It caught me off guard. "Yeah, kinda." "Why?" I used to take my boy to see matches in Green Bay, he said, his eyes lighting up in a way that didn't feel normal. You ever watch SmackDown? I nodded, and his grin widened even more. Tell you what, next Friday come by. I got some old DVDs. You can watch them with me if your mom says it's okay. I forced a smile. Maybe. Good, he said softly. I'll be waitin'. The way he said that, "I'll be waitin'," echoed in my head all night. The following Friday, Mom was working a double shift at the clinic. I got home from school to find a small cardboard box sitting on our porch. My name, Ashley, was written on it in thick, black Sharpie. There was no return address. I opened it inside, expecting maybe something Mom had ordered. Instead, I found a folded black t-shirt with the words, "Phenomenal One," AJ Styles across the chest. There was also a printed photo of AJ Styles, autographed, and a note. "Hope you like this, sweetheart. You deserve something special. Maybe you can come watch with me next week. Just you and me. T." My stomach dropped. T for Tom. I showed it to Mom when she came home. Her face went white. She immediately went to the phone and called the police. They came, asked a few questions, and took the box as possible evidence. Officer Grant, a large man with kind eyes, crouched beside me. "You said this was on the porch when you got home?" "Yeah." "You see anyone hanging around?" I shook my head. "Okay, you did the right thing telling your mom. If anyone comes to the door or tries to talk to you, you call us right away, all right?" I nodded, but I could see in his face he didn't expect to find much. Small-town cops didn't get cases like this. It stopped for a couple of weeks. I started thinking maybe I'd imagined everything that it was. Some weird coincidence. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, another package showed up, smaller this time. Inside was a printed picture. It was me standing in my driveway, wearing the blue tank top I'd had on last weekend. But the photo was edited. In it, I was standing next to AJ Styles, his arm wrapped around my shoulders like we were posing together. My real face, my real driveway. Only, I'd never taken that photo. The note beneath it read, "I can make this real for you, sweetie. Just say yes." I tore it up and threw it away, but that didn't stop the shaking. It was the first week of September. School had just started, and Mom had to go out of town for a work seminar overnight. She made me promise to lock all the doors, keep my phone nearby, and call her if anything felt off. Around 9 p.m., I was watching TV in the living room when I heard a faint tap on the front window. Then again, tap, tap, tap. I turned off the TV. Silence. A minute later, tap, tap, closer this time. I slowly walked to the window and pulled the curtain just an inch to the side. There he was, Mr. Riley, standing in the rain, staring right at me. I gasped and dropped the curtain. My heart was slamming in my chest. My phone was on the kitchen counter. I grabbed it and dialed 911 with trembling hands. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's outside my house. My neighbor, he's not supposed to be here. Are you in a safe location? I think so. He's right outside the window. Before I could finish, I heard the screen door creak. He was coming in. "Ma'am, stay on the line," the operator said, but I couldn't move. The doorknob rattled once, twice. Then click. The door opened. "Sweetheart." His voice slithered through the dark. "Why'd you ignore my letters?" I ran, up the stairs, into my room, slammed the door, locked it, shoved my dresser in front of it. He started up the steps. I could hear his boots. Thud, thud, thud. "Don't make this hard, Ashley," he called. "You'll like what I have planned. I'll make you happy." I swear it. I pressed the phone to my ear. "He's inside. He's upstairs. Please hurry. Officers are en route," the operator said calmly. "Stay quiet and stay hidden." The door shook violently as he started pounding on it. "You think you can keep me out?" Then came the sound of wood splintering. I screamed. He shoved the door open halfway, pushing against the dresser. His face came into view through the gap soaked from the rain, eyes wide, wild, animalistic. I grabbed the only thing nearby, a small metal lamp, and swung it at him. It hit his shoulder, and he roared in pain, stumbling back just as the sound of sirens pierced the night. "No," he bellowed, turning toward the stairs. "They're not taking me again." He bolted down the steps. I ran to the top of the landing and saw him fling open the back door just as the police burst through the front. "Red Oak PD, don't move." He made it only 3 steps out before Officer Grant tackled him to the ground. I stood there, shaking, clutching the lamp like it was a lifeline. Mom came home before sunrise. I'd never seen her cry like that. She held me for hours while officers moved in and out of the house taking photos and fingerprints. They found boxes in Riley's basement, dozens of photos of me. Some printed, some cut out and taped beside pictures of celebrities. There were notes, pieces of my trash, even an empty water bottle I'd thrown away weeks before. He'd been watching me every single day. The police later said he'd been under investigation years prior for stalking another family in a nearby county, but charges never stuck because the victims moved away. This time he didn't get that chance. It's been over a decade since that night. I'm 23 now, living in North Carolina with my fiancé, far away from Red Oak Hills. Sometimes, I still dream about that house, the sound of the rain, the tapping on the window. I'll wake up with that same cold dread in my stomach. I never saw Jamie again after that year. Mom sold the house the next summer and swore we'd never go back. Every once in a while, I'll Google Thomas Riley. Last I checked, he's still serving time in a state prison for attempted kidnapping, stalking, and sexual assault. People say time heals everything. Maybe. But I don't think I'll ever forget the way he said my name that night. Because every time I walk past a dark window, I still half expect to see him standing there, watching, waiting. I was 13 that summer, awkward, restless, and way too curious for my own good. My parents had split when I was barely old enough to remember. And since then, my brother and I spent every other weekend at my dad's trailer just outside a small town called Millbrook, Ohio. It wasn't the kind of place you bragged about: rows of faded mobile homes, dusty gravel roads, and neighbors who always seemed to know way too much about you. My dad worked construction, rough hands, soft heart, and he'd married a woman named Karen, a nurse who meant well but always acted like my brother and I were 2 extra chores she never signed up for. My brother Josh was 15 then, cocky, tall, thought he was a grown man because he could fry eggs without burning them. Every visit had the same rhythm. We'd wake up early, sneak Pop-Tarts from the cupboard before Karen came out, and then split up me in my room watching old action movies, him glued to the Xbox in his. That Saturday started no different. My dad had to take Karen to some doctor's appointment down in town. "Be good," he said, tossing Josh the man of the house title for the next few hours. "Don't open the door for anybody." Yeah, got it," Josh muttered without looking up from his controller. I was still in my pajamas, half asleep, when I threw on Live Free or Die Hard in my room. My dog, Rusty, a lazy golden mutt, was sprawled on the bottom bunk snoring like an old man. I loved that dog. He was more loyal than half the people in my life. By the time the credits rolled, the sun had climbed high, pouring through my thin curtains. I figured I should probably get dressed before Karen came home and complained about me being unproductive. My room wasn't big, just enough space for a bunk bed, a dresser, and a tiny TV. The window sat right above the top bunk, facing the edge of the park that bordered the trailer lot. I grabbed a t-shirt and jeans from the dresser. Rusty's ears perked up before I even pulled my shirt over my head. He stood up, tail stiff, staring straight at the window. Then, out of nowhere, he growled. Now, Rusty never growled. He'd bark at the mail truck or whine for table scraps. But this was different. This was deep, guttural, primal. I froze mid-motion, my pulse picking up. "What is it, boy?" I whispered, walking closer. He growled louder, his fur bristling. I moved toward the window, my stomach tight. From where I stood, I could see nothing but the thin layer of light coming through the blinds. My hands shook a little as I lifted one slat to peek outside. Nothing. Just the trees swaying and the old swing set behind the next trailer. "Relax, Rusty." I sighed, but my voice was unsteady. "It's probably a squirrel." I turned back toward the dresser, then froze. That feeling, the one that crawls up your spine when you know someone's watching you, hit me like a slap. Rusty's growl deepened. I turned my head slowly back toward the window. A hand, dirty, veiny, with yellowed fingernails pressed flat against the glass. My heart dropped into my stomach. Another hand followed, gripping the frame, and then a face rose into view, smiling. It was Mr. Donnelly, the guy who lived 5 trailers down. Mid-40s, always smelled like cigarettes and beer. The type who'd wave too long when you passed by. He'd made my skin crawl ever since I could remember. Now he was right there, peering into my room. His eyes swept across the space like he was cataloging everything, until they landed on me. And when they did, his smile widened. He lifted a finger and tapped the glass twice. Then, slowly, he motioned for me to come closer. "No," I mouthed, backing away. Rusty lunged, barking wildly, teeth bared. That only seemed to amuse him. He tried to slide the window open, fumbling with the latch. "Josh!" I screamed, voice cracking. "Josh, get in here!" My brother's footsteps thundered down the hall. The man froze, his eyes going wide. When Josh burst into the room, tall, angry, protective, Mr. Donnelly's smirk fell away. "The hell's going on?" Josh shouted, grabbing the metal bat that leaned against my wall. The man's face twisted fear, guilt, something dark, and then he bolted. Josh yanked open the blinds just in time to see him sprinting down the gravel road, stumbling in his work boots. "Hey!" Josh yelled, running out onto the porch. "You come back here, freak." I followed, trembling, clutching Rusty's collar as he fought to chase after the man. My heart pounded so hard it made my vision pulse. He disappeared around the corner, gone. Josh was still pacing, bat in hand, muttering curses. "What the hell was that? You know that guy?" I nodded shakily. "He's the one that always waves at us." He was watching me. He tried to open the window. Josh's jaw tightened. "Dad's gonna lose his mind if he hears this." "Then we don't tell him," I said quickly. "Please, Josh. You know what he'd do." He sighed, rubbing his face. "Yeah, you're right. He'd probably end up in jail." So we sat there on the couch, both quiet except for the sound of Rusty still growling under his breath. The air felt heavy, like the whole trailer had shrunk around us. Hours later, when Dad came home, we said nothing. Karen asked why Rusty was barking so much, and I just said a raccoon had gotten into the trash again. But I couldn't shake the image of that smile. Over the next few weeks, I avoided walking past Mr. Donnelly's trailer entirely. Every time we drove by, I'd catch a glimpse of him on his porch, beer can in hand, watching the road, watching me. Then one night, maybe 2 months later, sirens tore through the quiet neighborhood. Karen's friend, Miss Patty, lived 2 trailers away from Mr. Donnelly. She'd been attacked behind her house while taking her trash out. Luckily, her dog scared the guy off before he did much. When the cops came, I overheard Karen whispering to my dad that Patty had said the man smelled like beer and looked like Donnelly. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went to Patty's myself, told her everything, how he'd been at my window, how he'd tried to open it. She hugged me tight, her voice trembling. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. I'll take care of it." I didn't see him much after that. A few weeks later, the lot manager's truck was parked outside his trailer. The blinds were down. By the following weekend, the place was empty. Dad said he probably skipped rent again and got evicted. But I knew better. Years passed. I grew up, moved out, and only came back once to help my grandma move into that same trailer after my dad retired. I was 21. One night, while helping her unpack, I finally told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long time. Then she called my dad. He showed up that same evening, red-faced, furious. "You mean to tell me that freak was here at your window, and you didn't say a goddamn word?" "Dad, you would have killed him," I said softly. "And you know it." He stared at me, chest heaving, then finally nodded. "Yeah," he said, voice low. "Yeah, I probably would have." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in that same small room, the same creaky floor, staring at that window. The glass had been replaced since, but the view hadn't changed, the same stretch of trees, the same faint hum of streetlights. And every time the wind shifted, I swore I could still see a shadow standing there, watching, Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I check the sex offender registry just to make sure. His name's never come up, but the thought still gnaws at me. Because what if he changed his name? What if he moved somewhere else? What if he's standing outside some other kid's window right now? These days, whenever I hear a noise by my window, my body reacts before my brain does. My hand flies to whatever I can grab. Phone, bat, lamp, doesn't matter. My heart races, my stomach twists, and I remember that day all over again. If it weren't for Rusty barking, or for Josh running in when he did, God knows what that man would have done. So if you ever get that gut feeling that something's off, don't ignore it. Lock your doors, check your windows, and trust your instincts. Because sometimes, monsters don't hide under your bed. They stand outside your window and smile. I used to live with the biggest lunatic on the damn planet. His name was Reggie Morales, and he was this 6'4" Puerto Rican dude from the Bronx who somehow looked both homeless and famous. At the same time, gold chain, sleeveless Metallica shirt, torn jeans, and an attitude that could curdle milk. Reggie had exactly two emotional settings, furious or hysterical. There was no middle ground with that man. When he was in his laughing his ass off mood, he was loud but bearable. When he was in one of his ready to swing at anything that moves, moods though, you just prayed you wouldn't cross his path. I met Reggie through a roommate listing on Craigslist 2 years back when I was broke, desperate, and new to South Newark, New Jersey. I was doing food delivery for Uber Eats during the day and trying to work on my stand-up material at night. The apartment wasn't much cracked walls, a single squeaky window AC that rattled like an old bus, and pipes that screamed every time you ran the hot water, but the rent was cheap. And Reggie was usually out touring as a roadie for some post-hardcore band called Ashes on the Hudson. That meant peace and quiet for weeks at a time, which was basically heaven. But when he was home, hell had a zip code, and it was ours. One hot July afternoon, I remember sitting in the living room, sipping some sweet peach lemonade, half listening to a neighbor's bachata music drifting through the open window. It was one of those rare, lazy afternoons where life actually felt okay. Then the door slammed open so hard the frame cracked. Reggie came barreling in, covered head to toe in what looked like brick dust. His hair wild, eyes even wilder. "Yo, bro, you got bricks?" he shouted, panting like a maniac. I blinked. "Bricks? What the hell are you talking about, man? There's bricks on the damn roof. I need 'em," he said, pointing upward like some deranged prophet. "Reggie, you high again? I don't got bricks, man. Why would I have bricks?" He ignored me, storming out of the apartment and up the stairwell. I just sat there frozen for a second until I heard shouting outside, kids yelling in Spanish. I leaned out the window and saw a bunch of 1-year-olds on the sidewalk yelling, laughing, flipping me off. Then bam! A brick hit the spot where they were standing 2 seconds ago. I ducked. That was Reggie for you. The kind of guy who could leave to buy cigarettes and somehow end up in a brick fight with middle schoolers. By the time October rolled around, I was counting the days until he left for another band tour. I'd been saving to move out, but he told me he'd be gone for 2 weeks on a Halloween run, so I decided to tough it out a bit longer. Except, right before leaving, we got into a huge fight over rent. "You're late again, bro," Reggie barked, pacing the living room. "I'm not covering your ass this month." "I'm trying, man. Delivery's been dead lately." "Then hustle harder." "You think my band's living off F*** King Sunshine?" That was Reggie's version of a pep talk all fire. No empathy. But this time, it got ugly. He got right in my face. I could see his jaw tighten, that flicker in his eye like he was debating whether to hit me or not. I'll admit it, I was scared. Reggie wasn't the kind of guy who knew when to stop. Thankfully, he left the next morning. I watched from the window as he threw his backpack into his van and peeled off, middle finger waving through the window. When he was gone, I finally exhaled. For the first time in months, the apartment was quiet. 3 nights later, October 30th, I was sitting in our little kitchen, scrolling through rental listings on my cracked laptop while eating arepas and listening to a podcast. The place smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and stale beer. Then the buzzer went off. The intercom barely worked. but I heard a muffled voice. Something like, "Delivery for number 3. Door buzzer, no work." Without thinking twice, I buzzed them in. Newark's full of delivery guys. Who was I to question it? That's when I heard it. Boom. The front door to our building exploded open. I froze mid-bite. Before I could even stand up, 3 guys in black came charging up the stairs. Masks, gloves, one with a sledgehammer still in his hand. They kicked our apartment door in like it was paper. "Get on the floor," one shouted. "Now!" I hit the linoleum so fast my knees burned. My first thought was that it was the cops, but the second they started cursing in Spanish and arguing, I knew these weren't cops, these were stick-up guys. One of them yanked me up by my hoodie. "Where is it, cabron?" "Where's what?" I said, terrified. "Don't play stupid." He kicked me in the ribs, hard enough to make me curl up and gasp. "I don't know what you're talking about," I cried. "There's $20 in my wallet. Take it." They weren't looking for money, they were looking for something. They started tearing the apartment apart, pulling drawers, breaking plates, overturning the couch. I heard one of them mutter, "Bro, you sure this is the right place? He said he keeps it behind the bathtub sometimes." Another guy answered, "They only got a damn shower here, fool." That's when it hit me they had the wrong place. My heart was pounding. I was about to speak when one of them said, "He saw our faces, man. He gotta go." My whole body went cold. The one with the gun lifted it toward me. Another guy grabbed his arm. "Yo, chill, not here." They started arguing, yelling, pushing each other. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable slam of the building's front door. Heavy boots on the stairs. Then, a voice I would have known anywhere. "Yo, which one of you took my F***King amps?" "Reggie." He was back. The robbers froze. I froze. Reggie stomped up the stairs, cursing a storm. "Y'all think you can just break my—" He stepped into the apartment mid-sentence, staring at the wreckage. "What the f— Who are you?" One of the gunmen barked. "Who the hell are you?" Reggie shouted back. And then chaos. The gunman aimed at Reggie, but before he could fire, Reggie hurled his backpack straight at his face. The guy stumbled, misfired into the ceiling, and Reggie tackled him like a linebacker, slamming him into the floor. The other 2 jumped in. Reggie fought like a mad dog, headbutting, punching, kicking, just wild fury. "Reggie," I screamed, crawling for cover behind the counter. "Call the cops," he shouted back, still swinging. Then I heard a yell. Reggie had grabbed the gun. The 2 other guys backed off. Hands up. Reggie, breathing hard, bleeding from his forehead, pointed the gun at them. "You got 5 seconds to get the hell out of my apartment." They ran. He sat on the pinned guy's back, panting. "Yo, call 911 before I kill this piece of shit." I did. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hit the numbers. When the cops finally came, they arrested the guy Reggie had taken down. Only after the chaos died down did I notice the blood spreading across Reggie's shoulder. He'd been stabbed. A few hours later, Reggie came home from the hospital, high on painkillers and cheap whiskey he'd stopped for on the way back. The apartment looked like a war zone, glass everywhere, drawers overturned, door hanging off the hinges. He tossed his jacket onto the couch and grunted, "Yo, you clean up, right? I can't deal with this crap." I was sweeping the floor when I said, quietly, "Reggie, you saved my life, man. For real." He looked up at me, really looked for the first time ever. His face softened just a little. Then he smirked. "You coulda jumped in any time, bro." I laughed, half crying. "Yeah, sure, man." He turned toward his room, muttering, "Did you see the look on those guys' faces, though? That shit was hilarious." He laughed, that same unsettling, high-pitched laugh that could peel paint off walls. And as his door slammed shut behind him, I just stood there, broom in hand, heart still racing. For all the hell he put me through. That psycho neighbor, the biggest idiot I ever met, had saved my damn life. I was 28 when I finally moved into my own place, a small duplex apartment tucked into a quiet residential area just outside of Burlington, Vermont. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The upstairs unit had a little balcony that looked over the street, and every evening you could hear the faint hum of cicadas mixed with the soft laughter of families walking their dogs. The woman downstairs was named Mrs. Landry, 86 years old, hard of hearing, and impossibly kind. Her son and daughter-in-law owned the property and stopped by almost daily to check on her. They'd mow the lawn, trim the hedges, and chat with her for a while before leaving. Because of them, the place always felt alive, safe. For the first time in years, I felt settled. That sense of safety didn't last long. The first time I met my new neighbor was during my second week there. It was a late Sunday afternoon. I was cleaning out my car, humming to myself, when a voice startled me. "Hey there," a man said from across the hedges. "You just move in?" I looked up. He was leaning against the hood of a dull blue pickup truck, a middle-aged guy with thinning hair and a round belly pressing against his flannel shirt. Yeah," I said, smiling politely. "Just a couple of weeks ago." He stepped closer, wiping his hands on a rag. "Name's Brian. I'm in the unit next to yours. Figured I'd say hello before we end up bumping into each other in the driveway." I extended a hand, but he didn't take it, just looked at it, smiled oddly, and said, "Good to have another single tenant around here." That line stuck with me. I didn't mention that my boyfriend sometimes visited on weekends. Something about Brian's tone made me instinctively withhold that information. He asked what I did for a living. I told him I worked as a legal assistant for a small firm downtown. "A lawyer, huh?" he said, smirking. "Guess I better watch what I say around you." "Not a lawyer," I corrected. "Just an assistant." He laughed, loud and forced. Sure, that's how it starts." We chatted for another minute, but there was something off about him. His eyes didn't quite meet mine when he spoke. They seemed to drift, lingering on my hands, my neck, anywhere but my face. When I finally excused myself and went back inside, I felt this strange, crawling discomfort. For the next few weeks, every time I came home from work, no matter the hour, Brian seemed to be outside. If it was daylight, he'd pretend to be working on his truck. At night, he'd just be standing there by his porch, smoking. And every single time, without fail, "Evening, Jess." Or, "Hey there, long day?" The first few times, I forced a smile and waved. But after a while, I started to dread pulling into the driveway. One night, I got home a little after 9. The street was quiet, just the sound of crickets and the hum of the streetlight buzzing overhead. As I stepped out of my car, Brian appeared from the shadows, cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. "Thought you weren't coming home tonight," he said. I froze. I just had to work late," I said, fumbling for my keys. He took a slow drag, eyes fixed on me. "You ought to text someone when you're going to be late like that. Dangerous world out there." I didn't respond. I just smiled weakly and hurried to my apartment. As I reached my door, I could still feel his eyes on me. A few days later, he knocked. It was around 8 in the evening. I'd just finished washing the dishes when the knock echoed through my small living room. When I opened the door, Brian stood there holding a small basket. "Brought you some tomatoes," he said. "Grew 'em myself." Thanks," I said, taking the basket. "You like wine?" he asked casually. I hesitated. "Sometimes, yeah." "I've got a bottle of red open right now," he said. "You should come by. We can have a glass, talk a little. It gets quiet here, you know." "Maybe another time," I said quickly. "I've got some work to finish up tonight." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sure thing, another time." As he turned to leave, I could hear him muttering under his breath, something like, "You'll change your mind." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint noise outside, it all made my heart race. Around midnight, I heard the faint sound of gravel crunching. Someone was walking outside. I peeked through the blinds. Brian was standing in the parking lot, facing my apartment. He wasn't moving, just staring up toward my window. I dropped the blinds instantly, heart hammering. The next morning, I called my friend Lena and told her what happened. She came over that evening to help me put up thicker curtains in the kitchen and bedroom. "Jess, that guy's creepy as hell," she said. "You should tell the landlord." "I don't want to make it a thing," I said. "He hasn't really done anything illegal." She gave me a look. "Yet." We both laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the unease. About a month passed. I rarely saw Brian anymore. And I started convincing myself maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe he really was just lonely. Then one rainy night, someone knocked again. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. I wasn't expecting anyone. "Who is it?" I called. "It's me," a man's voice answered. "Brian." My stomach dropped. "What do you need?" "Your car window's open," he said. "It's raining pretty hard. Thought you'd want to know." I hesitated. "Thanks. I'll get it later." "Nah, I already shut it for you," he said through the door. "Didn't want your seats to get soaked." Something about that made me feel sick. He'd been close enough to my car to reach inside. "Okay. Thanks," I said weakly, but I didn't open the door. He lingered a moment longer. I could hear him breathing. Then he muttered something low, too quiet to understand, and walked away. The weeks that followed were quiet again. I almost let myself relax. Until one afternoon the next summer, I was heading to my car when Brian appeared by his truck, wiping his hands. "Hey," he said, "got some news." "Oh?" "I'm moving," he said with a shrug. "Got a job offer in Maine. Guess I won't be around to keep an eye on you anymore." "Keep an eye on me?" I repeated. He chuckled. "This neighborhood ain't what it looks like, Jess. Not everyone here's nice, but you'll figure that out." Before I could ask what he meant, he waved and turned away. That was the last real conversation we had. A week later, when I came home from work, there was a paper bag sitting neatly by my front door. Inside was a small bottle of red wine. Taped to it was a handwritten note. "I really enjoyed having you next door. Too bad we never got to share that glass. Take care of yourself, Jess. Maybe someday you'll think of me when you drink this." I stared at the note for a long time. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, like he'd written it in a rush. I poured the wine down the sink without opening it. Months passed. I almost forgot about him until one night last winter. I'd just gotten out of the shower when I heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from the kitchen. When I looked, the curtain by the window was moving slightly, as if someone had just brushed against it. I froze. Then, from outside, I heard soft footsteps fading away down the driveway. The next morning, there were faint boot prints in the snow outside my kitchen window, size 11 or 12 maybe, and a cigarette butt half buried near the steps. No one else in the complex smoked anymore. I reported it to the landlord. She said she'd install cameras near the lot, but I never saw any. It's been 2 years since then, and I've moved to another city. I still catch myself checking windows before I undress, making sure curtains are drawn tight, double locking doors before bed. Sometimes, when I walk to my car at night, I still half expect to hear that slow, familiar voice. "Evening, Jess." But there's only silence, and somehow, that silence feels worse.